So here's an unpopular opinion. We should privatize the police. No, wait, hold on, hold on. Hear me out. Uh, for the past few years now, there's not really more than a week goes by before there's some story about police brutality or unwarranted use of police force in the news or in the media. Now, I mean, we can debate as to the legitimacy of each of those stories. A lot of them are not legitimate. Some of them are, and none of them, of course, give all of the information, because what news story really does give all the information, like in the history of ever? But when it comes right down to it, there is a problem going on in our society with the use of force and with the police. Whether that be how they are perceived, or actual problems with individual police officers. I really can't say. I haven't done all that much research into individual police departments. The idea, though, that it's a systemic issue, I don't really see much evidence that it's systemic with the police in general. We're talking about hundreds, thousands, tens of thousands of people going to work trying to do their job. This seems to be that, just like with any other position of authority or power, there are going to be people that don't want to do the wrong thing, that don't want to do the right thing, that want to do the wrong thing, being drawn to these positions. So how do we make it so that people that are in these positions want to act in the public good? I think the best way of doing that is making the public good their personal desire, their personal good. The best way to do that is to make it worth their while, essentially. I hate to say it that way. But let's take a look at the problems that have been being talked about in our police departments. The ideas of police brutality, the lack of good training for our police, the lack of accountability for our police officers. When it comes to police brutality, yeah, there are going to be instances where there are police officers that overuse their authority, use too much force in order to stop a situation or prevent a situation from going on. The most recent example that's been in the news all over the place is the shooting of Daniel Shaver in Arizona by Mitch Brailsford. I'm reading it at the same time, so I don't actually remember all of their names and everything. And a lot of people have been very, very upset about what's been going on, and I totally understand the idea that a police officer shot a man 7 times in the back when he appears to be complying with a police officer's orders seems to be excessive. Now, a lot of people are saying that he should have been charged with murder, but I've looked at the entire video, and you can see Daniel Shaver reaching for his waistline, being warned that if he does it again, he'll be shot, and then doing it again. So, is a complete acquittal appropriate? I don't think so. I think that there should have been some form of formal charge there. But is a charge of murder, even second-degree murder, appropriate? No, I don't think so. I don't think that that's an appropriate charge. Um, I don't even think that involuntary manslaughter would be an appropriate charge. I'm not sure what the appropriate charge would be, but I think there should be some form of repercussions other than just losing his job with benefits. Mind you, this is just my personal opinion. I am not a lawyer. I am not a legal expert in any way. That's how I see the facts of the case. It looks like Daniel Shaver was mainly complying, but uh, made some actions that, I mean, when you're in a position like that, you have to act quickly, and I don't believe he acted appropriately, but put any person in that situation, a police officer that's putting their lives on the line every single day, telling a person, hey, don't reach for your waistline, I don't know what's there. He didn't say he didn't know what was there, but he didn't know what was there. Any single person being put into that situation, like I might have acted in exactly the same way. I might have acted in exactly the same way. I don't know because I've never been in that position. So when it comes to something like this, I tend to err more on the side of caution and more on the side of understanding and innocence in the cases of the accused. Now, and there have been plenty of cases in the past with in the past where police brutality has been brought up. I don't believe that all of the cases. Actually, I believe that most of the cases are not really indicative of a police brutality state, as it were, or of systemic problems with the police. Most of the times, when you take a look at all the evidence, you can see that the police were acting generally fairly appropriately. And I'll leave it to people to look up the individual cases. And of course, if I'm wrong, comment down below. I will. I read all the comments. Not that there are that many at this point, but I read all the comments and take everything into account. I want to know where I'm wrong because I want to be right. And the best way of being right is admitting when you are wrong. So if I'm wrong, let me know in the comments below, and I will definitely take a look at them and read them and give them their due diligence. Training is another thing that keeps on being brought up. A lot of people bring up that police officers are not appropriately trained and they need better training. Well, I don't know too much about police training, but I've gone through the initial testing process in order to even be in order to even be in order to even get the forgetting how to English. In or I've taken the test, the physical and written exams in order to go to the police academy, but I never actually went to the police academy, so I can't really say as to what the training is actually like. But everything I've seen about the training seems to be fairly similar to like Army basic training, which I did go through, and yeah, that's not bad training. I mean, it's obviously every person has their own gifts. So not everybody's going to go through it a saint. Actually, nobody's going to go through it a saint because nobody is. But yeah, no, from what I've seen, it seems to be fairly okay training. Are there places it can be improved? Of course, there are places everything can be improved. But I'm not going to talk about what can be improved there because honestly, I don't know what goes on during that training. The last thing that people to keep on talking about is a perceived lack of accountability for the police. I don't think that's really true, all things considered. Mainly on account of the fact that the people that well, it's let me restate. It's not that I don't think it's true. It's that I don't think it's. I think that if it is a problem, if there is a problem with a lack of accountability with the police, then one of the main things we can be doing about it is making sure that the people in charge, the people that have the responsibility, are much more easily able to lose their jobs, much more easily able to be replaced. This is where I'm coming down to privatization. Because one of the problems a lot of people have with privatization is they think that that private police forces will not be held to the same standard as public police forces. Well, isn't that the whole point? We want a higher standard. A lot of people think that it'll be a lower standard, but I don't see any reason to believe that a private business will have a lower standard. I don't see any reason to believe that a private security company would be held less accountable for their actions. I don't see any reason to believe that a private security would not care as much as a public utility. Let me go through it list by list. Why do I think that a private police force would be more accountable? The reason I believe that is because in a public police force, it's owned by the state, essentially. It's owned by the municipalities and the state. And so in order to replace anybody, you have to elect a new sheriff, you have to elect a new mayor, and all of them are accountable to the mayor. Anybody that's taken a look at any political map recently knows that there are a lot of areas, especially high crime areas like Detroit, Chicago, New York. All these places tend to be fairly politically homogenous. You tend to have the same party running the show over and over and over again. You have mayors that are serving 4, 5, 6 terms. You have sheriffs that are running 4, 5, 6 terms, and they're in charge of the police forces. So as the police do are put more and more under fire, that buck eventually stops at the sheriff and at the sheriff and at the mayor and the governor for like statewide police forces. Now, if it were a private police force, then it would be a private security company holding a governmental contract. And if the people are losing faith in the government, sorry, my hat. If the where was I? If the people are losing faith in the police, then you don't need to elect a new sheriff. You don't need to elect a new mayor. You can have the same mayor, the same sheriff. The police force, the private company, will simply lose this lucrative government contract and be replaced with a different security company. A security company that has its own training, a security company that has its own hierarchy, completely new people. If like 2 or 3 police officers are doing the wrong thing, and the police force, the private security company, isn't fixing that, then the entire company loses this lucrative government contract. I've heard over and over and over again how people say that the one thing that in a capitalist society that people are worshiping is green. It's money. Well, why don't we make that work? Why don't we make that work for us? If a security company is afraid of losing a government contract, then they're going to be holding their people's feet under the fire. It's like I work for in my personal life, I work for a let's try that again. In my personal life, I work for a pharmacy. I am forgetting how to English all over the place today. In my personal life, I work for a pharmacy, and pharmacies are basically all privately owned, but they all fall under HIPAA requirements. And if a pharmacy doesn't comply with those HIPAA requirements, there's hell to pay. There's hell to pay. I've heard of pharmacies being under investigation. I've heard of pharmacies being closed completely down because of honestly relatively minor HIPAA violations. And don't get me wrong, that should happen. That should happen. I'm not saying that those closings were not warranted. The HIPAA is a good set of regulations, and they should be there. One of the ways of which I'm not libertarian, but HIPAA is a good set of regulations. They should be there because people's private information should be protected. But the same would be true for the police. I don't see any reason to believe that the police would be any different. If we're looking at better training, then privatization would be the way to go as well. Because if you don't like the way one group of people is being trained, you just go to another security company. There's nothing stopping people from doing that. And the fact that each of these security companies would be competing for a fairly lucrative government contract means that they would be trying to have the best training they absolutely can, probably have extremely high standards, but also probably have higher pay to entice people to bring themselves up to those standards. So the idea that we need better training, I think that would be better served by a privatized police force. Not only that, we'd have a better value for our buck, because they'd want to. One of the great things about a capitalist system is that the companies that are around, the companies that are competing with each other, are trying to make the best product for the lowest price. That way, we would get the best product for the lowest price when it comes to policing. It's just a better value altogether. We'd have more options for municipalities and counties, and even possibly entire state-run police departments could be replaced by this system. It just seems to be a lot of good that could come from allowing the private sector into the police force rather than just having it all run by hegemonic municipalities, hegemonic political entities, essentially. I think that that is significantly more prone to corruption than the alternative. I want to see competition in all lives. So it's like if I'm wrong, let me know in the comments below. That's pretty much what I had to say on the matter. Uh, if I'm wrong, if I'm right, mainly if I'm wrong, I want to know I want to know if I'm wrong. I want to know the problems with what I'm saying. Be feel free to let me know in the comments below. You like what you're hearing. Feel free to subscribe and follow me on Twitter as well. Let me know where I'm wrong there because I'll see that immediately. Yeah, absolutely. Just thanks for listening to just some guy with a camera.